we've explored a lot of information. I remember one of my friends and colleagues hearing me talk many years ago, very early in my ministry, and he was joking with me saying, "You gave them 20 points in that lesson." Give them 2 or 3. And I realized, as I was reflecting back on this series, how much information I think I do put into each message. And I think I do because I value your time. And it is always my prayer and hope that at least an idea registers with you in a way that you feel, oh, I'm glad I came, or I'm glad I tuned in. I can work with that idea. And so as we've been examining together healthy relationships, we've taken a look at what's foundational to healthy relationships and what's a starting point. How do we define a healthy relationship? What does it look like? What does it feel like? We've taken a look at the importance of trust in relationships, how to build it and how to maintain it, what it means to be trustworthy in a relationship, and how important that is to building successful, meaningful, long-term relationships. And of course, we touched upon something that could be a whole series of messages in how do we communicate more effectively and how important the listening part of communication really is and how often undervalued that part is. And today I want to wrap it up with a variety of ideas on this thought of nurturing intimacy and connection. And when I'm talking about intimacy, I'm not talking about physical intimacy. I'm talking about emotional, spiritual, mental intimacy. The kind of intimacy that really is what does allow for very successful physical intimacy, but that's not my focus with you. My focus is on intimacy as it relates to us connecting on a heart level, a soul level, a mind level, and what that means for connection. Shana, as you were sharing how you appreciated the words of that song and it was helpful to you as you were thinking about just things going on in the world and maybe in your personal life, I was thinking too just how important connection is for us right now. It always is, but I think even more so as we still struggle with a world that seems so divided in so many ways. I think we are acting more like a human race pitted against each other at times than a human family trying to find ways to move together, trying to find ways of common interest, common ground, common support. And so I hope that as I share with you some ideas this morning on nurturing intimacy and connection, that there's something that will be of practical help for you. I'm going to touch upon 5 different ideas, and again, my hope is that at least one of them will strike a chord with you. They are these ideas that help nurture intimacy and connection: mutual respect, quality time shared together, thoughtfulness, the importance of social or support networks, and building relationship-friendly environments. So it's kind of a very broad way of looking at intimacy and connection. So the first, mutual respect and trust. Mutual respect and trust. Think about the relationships that you have in your life. They can hopefully are with your significant other, with family and friends or business partners, the ones that are the most successful and meaningful to you. As you think about those relationships, I imagine that you would agree that those are relationships where there is mutual respect and trust that you have with that other person and that they have with you. Am I right in that? Mutual respect, meaning that you may not agree on everything. You may see some things very differently. You may have different opinions, but you respect the other person regardless of those differences. You're able to listen to them. You're able to take in their point of view, what they have to say. You value them as another human being, every bit as worthy of love and attention and respect as you are. You value their opinions. You value their points of view. You value their boundaries. You value their boundaries. There's a level of reciprocity in the respect and a level of reciprocity in the trust that you share. In Ephesians 2:30, we're told, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. Let each of you look not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others. You know that I don't often quote scripture verses, but at times I feel it's important, especially in talking about a topic that falls so squarely in the idea of personal growth, that we can forget that it is also a very spiritual topic, how we relate to each other. It also is supportive to me to realize that some of the same things that you and I might be struggling with in life today, the ways that we relate to one another, these are kind of old struggles. I mean, think about how old both the Old Testament and the New Testament are, right? And here you had people then even trying to encourage one another in healthier behaviors. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. Let each of you look not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Would you not say that that is still a valid behavior today? I think it is. I think it is. So mutual respect and trust is a way that I think we can nurture intimacy with another, really connect with another. Second is this, quality time. Quality time strengthens our connections with each other. This is true whether we're talking about our spouse, our lifelong partner, whether we're talking about our family members or our friends, whether we're talking about close work relationships or business relationships. Spending quality time together is so very important. How many of you have found that it's actually maybe a little more difficult now to do that than it used to be? I know that's true for me. I know that's true for me. I also know sometimes I have to actually put it in my calendar or write it down as a reminder so that I see it and I pay attention to it. Because one of many things I've come to appreciate more deeply is we never know how long we're going to have that relationship with that other person before something happens and they're no longer with us. Just on Friday, I lost a very dear friend, somebody that I used to call my soul sister. She used to call me her soul sister. And I found myself reflecting and feeling like, gosh, I wish I had done a better job of spending more quality time with that person. Even though geographically it was not possible to get together so easily, I know that if I had valued quality time a little bit more, if I had made a little more effort, I would have enjoyed an even deeper connection with her before that is no longer possible on the physical level. We know this. I know I'm not saying anything to you that you don't already know. But what I do believe to be true is it's so easy to forget these things. With all the many demands that we have on our time, with all the things we are trying to fit in and put together, just to be able to say, you know what? I'm going to do even better to remember what matters most. That if I really want to have relationships that are deeply connected, that are intimate on a mental and emotional and spiritual level, I have to make the time for that. And not time where half of me is looking at my phone, right? Time where it is truly undivided time. And if it means we have to block it off on our calendar or set a reminder on our watch or whatever, if we have to use technology to help us remember to do that until it becomes more automatic, then so be it. Then so be it. And to know that that quality time is about how we show up in the time. It isn't always about how long the time is. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that when you're really, really, really with somebody, when your whole self is engaged in the conversation or in the listening, that isn't necessarily about how long the time was, but how deep you went into the shared experience. I remember many years ago when I was doing much more reading of the Transcendentalists and the Transcendentalist movement, I came across this story of Ralph Waldo Emerson, probably the premier Transcendentalist. Wonderful essayist. A lot of our roots in unity can be traced back through the Transcendentalists. Ralph Waldo Emerson had a really good friend that lived an ocean away, and that good friend was Thomas Carlyle. Thomas Carlyle was a Scottish historian and also an essayist. And for years they would communicate in the old-fashioned way, the only way then, of writing letters to one another. And they wanted to meet. And what I remember about this story was that how when they finally met, and this is like in the 1800s, when Edison finally went over to Scotland to meet with his friend Thomas Carlyle. They had exchanged so many letters over the years, but what was interesting is when they met, for the first several hours they sat together in silence. In silence. Two brilliant intellectual, well-known in their day and age, writers and essayists, spending time in silence. And when they broke the silence, it was to go even deeper into the connection that they had felt intellectually over those years. What I was struck by in that is the power of silence when you're with somebody that you know well and somebody that you want to go even deeper with in your connection and relationship. Think about when you first meet someone, a friendship where you haven't been together for a whole lot of time, or a dating relationship where you're just kind of getting to know each other. Would you not say that silence in those situations can often be quite uncomfortable and awkward, right? That we want to so quickly avoid that discomfort or awkwardness, so we fill it with noise. We fill it, sometimes meaningful noise called conversation, but not always. We fill it. And yet, when there is a close relationship, we can be together in the richness of presence and silence. And that feels comfortable. I also remember, and some of you may have heard of this marriage therapist, his name is Terry Reals. I remember learning about an exercise that he would do in his marriage counseling. And I was so intrigued by this exercise. He would have his couples sit together in absolute silence, same room, next to each other for 8 hours. No distractions. I know some of you going, no distractions, not making love, just absolutely together, no distractions, in silence, together. And he would write about how awkward that was. And then he'd say, and here were people who were intimately connected for years, but they didn't know how to be together in absolute stillness and silence with one another for 8 hours. And part of the reason he would have these couples do this was to see what would come up in that awkwardness. And oftentimes what would come up would be things that had been unresolved, that needed to be looked at and then talked through. So by your response, I think your response was very similar to mine the first time I had read about it. So you can research him a little bit if it's something that you want to kind of explore. But it's this idea of being able to go deep with another in silence and share that silence together. Quality time is not just the time we spend in silence, it's also the time we spend together with one another in meaningful activities. And you know, in so many of our religious and cultural traditions, there's a richness of shared experience. Think about in the Jewish tradition, think about Shabbat. Think about Friday night, the start of the Sabbath, and sharing the Shabbat meal and lighting the candles and sharing stories and being together in a very focused and special kind of way. In Hinduism, you have the kirtan, which is kind of a call and response singing that's done in a community kind of way. Why? To bring a rich experience of sharing something together. In the Muslim tradition, you have the breaking of Ramadan with the experience of a shared meal at the end of the day. So there's the fasting from sunrise to sunset, and then there's the coming together, the breaking of that fast, the storytelling, the being together. These are old practices in many, many instances, old practices that have deep roots. Why are they sustained today? I think they're sustained today because there's a part of the experience that fills us, that nurtures us, that helps us feel seen and appreciated, that helps us to feel as if we belong. Does that make sense? As if we belong to each other. Was it last week? I think, yes, it was just a week ago tomorrow. So last Monday, we had one of our monthly board meetings, and we were talking as a board about guiding words as a board for our community. And one of the words that kept coming up among several of our board members is and was the word belonging, that they feel so much, as do I, that what we have together in unity, whether it's physically in this room together or connecting with our virtual family, is a sense of belonging, a shared experience around the things that we believe and hold to be true, right? And there's a certain strength, I think, that comes when we feel that kind of belonging. And there's a certain courage that comes when we feel that kind of belonging. The courage to stand in the truth that we believe, to stand for the things that we believe, love and kindness and peace and truth and justice and fairness and all of those things. But when we feel a sense of belonging from shared experience, from quality time together, we're empowered to stand in those principles and to stand for those ideas. A third aspect, I think, that can help us with nurturing intimacy and connection is the simple idea of thoughtfulness. Thoughtfulness, say that word with me. Thoughtfulness, thoughtfulness. Can you think of a person in your life that you would label very thoughtful? Someone in your life that you consider to be just a really, really thoughtful person. How does that make you feel when you think about that person? Nothing? Well, I know how it makes me feel when I think of people in my life that are thoughtful. It makes me feel appreciated. It makes me feel loved. It makes me feel like I want to look deeper inside myself at where and how I might be more thoughtful. As I was giving thought to this idea of thoughtfulness, I was thinking how it really rests upon a practice of paying attention. That might sound kind of boring or very ordinary, but if you think about it, to be a thoughtful person means you've been paying attention to that other person, right? You've been paying attention to maybe the things that they like or don't like. You've been paying attention to what's important to them. You've been paying attention, you've been noticing. And maybe you've even made notes to yourself. Oh, this is a particular date that's important to that person. Such and such happened to that person on this day. I'm going to remember that. I know I've tried to make it a practice whenever anybody in our community has lost a loved one. I know how painful that can be. And I've made it a practice, I try to do it consistently, that whenever someone in our community loses a loved one, I mark it forward exactly 365 days from the day that that person lost that loved one. And I reach out with a phone call or an email, And I do because if you've ever lost a loved one, or someone really close to you, you know that that first anniversary can be what? Really hard, really painful, because probably everybody else that had shown up for the memorial service or the funeral, they've gone on with their lives as rightfully they should. But there's that lingering awareness, and maybe not so lingering, strong feeling of loss of that person. That's because in that situation, I was paying attention, right? I really believe that to be a more thoughtful person requires that we pay attention. What is it that that friend really cares about? What's really important to that friend? What's really important to that business associate? What's really important to your partner, to your spouse? And can you either commit it to your memory or write it somewhere so it lives in you and prompts from you an act of kindness to extend toward that person? I'd love to see us co-create together not just a kinder world, but a more thoughtful world. A world in which we are paying attention to one another more and then acting upon that attention, acting upon the little things that we can do. In Ephesians, we're told, be kind and compassionate toward each other. We could spend our whole life just doing that, don't you think? Right? I mean, if you ever doubt that there is room for improvement with that, put that on your dashboard of your car. Be kind and compassionate toward each other. Do you think there might ever be a moment when you're driving your car that you might have a little room for improvement around that? Anybody feel like they might? I know there are times that I certainly would be kind and compassionate toward each other. A fourth area for strengthening or nurturing intimacy and connection, this fourth and this fifth idea have to do with community. And it's the idea of the role and the place of community or support networks to help us to feel stronger and more capable to live our lives in a purposeful way. When we have a sense, as I touched upon earlier, of belonging to something bigger than ourselves, belonging to a tribe, belonging to a community, belonging to a Sangha, when we have that place, it is a safe place for us. It is a place in which we can share our pain and we can celebrate our joys. It's a place where we can feel lifted up in such a way that we can move forward with greater strength, with greater ease, and with greater purpose. In Buddhism, the idea of Sangha, the idea of community, is a very core part of that teaching and practice. There's the monastic Sangha in Buddhism, where the monks have taken vows to live their lives in a very particular kind of way. But then there's the Sangha of the lay people, much like we might call our community a Sangha, where we haven't taken monastic vows, but we are committed to certain high ideals and certain ways of living and being there with and for each other. Intimacy and connection happens when we are there for each other. And have you noticed that the times that you are called upon literally or suggestively to be there for another are not always the most convenient times? Have you noticed that they don't always fall during the hours of the day where you've got this big chunk of time that you can just drop everything and be there? I know. And that's where we have to make those tough choices, right? Those tough choices where we ask of ourselves, is this my time to step in? Is this my time to be part of the place where healing can happen, part of the place where community can happen, that lifts up, that connects, that strengthens, and that nurtures? And I think that when we are already part of a community such as that, we get better and better and better at showing up in those ways. And then the very last idea that I want to share with you is this idea. And this is a rather different idea, I think. And it came as I was reminded of the work of one of my friends and colleagues. His name is Dr. Steve Albert. He wrote a book many, many years ago. He was a board member at our church for years. He and his wife, Abigail, still come from time to time. They are both New Thought ministers. And one of Steve's very first books is a book called Talk Zones. Talk Zones. And in it, or Peopleism Talk Zones. And in it, he wrote this book probably 30 years ago. He had this idea way back then. I don't know what the world was going through then, but it was in response to the idea of bringing people together. And so he had envisioned putting signs around in various places, whether libraries or markets or out on benches or like in our lobby that said Talk Zone. And the idea would be for people to know they could congregate there just to talk in peaceful ways about whatever was on their mind and heart. Could you imagine if we started doing that? We might need to have a few guidelines, like talk zones does not mean fighting. It doesn't mean talking over each other. It requires civility. It requires mutual respect and listening. But would that not be a powerful idea? I actually think it would be. In fact, I reached out to Steve and I said, what if we put upstairs at the top of our stairs, where we have those comfy couches, some of you maybe don't even know we have that, put signs up there that said Talk Zones. And those of you who just wanted to go upstairs and sit on a comfy couch, grab a cup of coffee, go up there and talk about whatever's on your mind. Whether it's stuff that's going on in the world or stuff that's going on in your family, not facilitated, but you just go up there and you decide to open up and have a conversation and connect with each other. I think there's power in us simply connecting, simply sharing something of our life journey, our story, what's up for us, what we're hoping about, or what we're afraid of. Some of you, I think, are liking the idea because you seem to be turning and talking to each other. But connection is important. It's really important. And if we're paying attention to some of the research that's coming out, it's even more important now than ever before as more and more people are feeling isolated, and not just from the political climate, but just feeling isolated from one another and separated from one another. And where do we find people we can be with and connect with? I think creating pockets and places where we can do that is important. How many of you are familiar with the term third place? Not like in first place, second place in a competition, not like that, but third place. Only one of you, okay. A people zone would be like a third place. So first place, the way this term is used, first place is your home. Second place for most of us is our work. Third place, and it may be Starbucks that first started using this term, I don't know, but third place is that other place we go and we hang out, right? What if our community was even more of a third place where we could just hang out and be together? We need to connect with each other, people who are like us as well as people who are not like us, to deepen in our own personal growth and to be about what we can be about, to creating a more loving, peaceful, kind, and just world for us all. So I hope there's at least maybe one or two little nuggets that you walk away with today that you go, I can do this, or I'm going to think about that. Namaste.